Welcome to Fiano Gestricton. When punishment became reality, the soft hum of the city outside barely reached the small apartment where Aaron sat, staring at the pile of clothes sprawled across his bed. The evening sun spilled through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor and painting the room in hues of orange and gold. Normally, Aaron enjoyed the quiet solitude that evenings like this offered. But today, his chest was tight with anticipation, an anxious mixture of fear and excitement that he couldn't quite explain. Aaron was not new to secrecy. For years, he had navigated two very different lives. By day, he was the diligent junior analyst at a marketing firm, keeping up appearances of an average young man with a meticulously ordinary routine. By night, he became someone else entirely, a version of himself that the world wasn't ready to see. He cross-dressed, not merely for amusement, but as a way to explore a side of his identity that society had trained him to hide. Dressing up was more than clothing. It was an escape, a thrill, and sometimes a confession to himself of who he truly was. Tonight, the stakes were higher than usual. His girlfriend, Isabella, was supposed to be out for the evening with friends, leaving him a private window to indulge in his secret, but the thought of her returning unexpectedly noted him like a shadow that refused to leave. He carefully picked up a soft navy blue dress from the pile, letting his fingers linger over the silky fabric. Each garment in his collection told a story. The curve of a skirt that hugged his hips in just the right way. The shimmer of a blouse that accentuated his shoulders. The precise fit of high heels that made him taller, more confident, more someone else. Aaron's fascination with crowd dressing wasn't born out of whimsy. It had roots in a complicated past. Growing up, he had always felt different, drawn to things society labeled as feminine. Dolls, fashion magazines, delicate fabrics, all were objects that spoke to him in ways he couldn't voice. As he grew older, the urge didn't diminish. It intensified. But fear and societal expectations pushed him into hiding, masking his identity behind layers of clothing that were acceptable for a man. It wasn't until he met Isabella that he dared to explore this side of himself, though only in secrecy. Isabella, his girlfriend of nearly 2 years, was the kind of person who seemed to read people like open books. Bright, empathetic, and stubbornly curious, she often asked questions that made Aaron's heart race. And yet, she had no idea about this hidden part of him, about the nights he spent transforming into someone entirely new in the sanctuary of their shared apartment. He loved her deeply, which made the secret all the more suffocating. If she ever discovered it, he feared not only her disappointment, but also the judgment of the world he carefully navigated during the day. The dress in his hands felt heavier tonight. It wasn't the fabric. It was the weight of possibility of what could happen if he slipped, even for a second. Aaron had always been meticulous. Every wig, every shoe, every brush stroke of makeup placed with precision. Tonight, however, something in the air felt different. The thrill of transformation was mingled with a sense of foreboding. A silent warning that tonight's indulgence might not remain a private affair. He laid the dress gently on the bed, unfolding it with deliberate care, and began his ritual. First came the foundation, applied in soft, steady strokes to conceal the angles that gave away his male features. He traced the curves of his eyes with eyeliner, making them appear larger, more delicate. Mascara followed, curling each lash until his reflection seemed almost unrecognizable. Every brush, every touch was both an act of creation and a silent confession to the woman staring back at him in the mirror. The heels came next. Aaron had learned to walk in them over months of practice, balancing the thrill of height with the vulnerability it brought. Placing each foot into the soft leather, he felt a surge of confidence ripple through him. He was taller now, elegant, poised, someone completely apart from the timid man who filed reports and made small talk at work. The final touch was the dress slid over his shoulders, brushing against his skin like a promise he had made to himself. Standing before the mirror, Aaron took in the full transformation. The person looking back at him was both familiar and foreign, an embodiment of his secret desires, a version of himself that only came to life when the world's expectations were temporarily lifted. He practiced a small smile, the kind Isabella adored, wondering for a fleeting second how she would react if she walked in right now. A part of him feared the judgment. Another part, an impulsive, reckless part, hoped she would see and understand. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of traffic. Aaron's phone buzzed briefly. A notification from Isabella. He froze. The message read simply, "Running late tonight. See you later." Relief flooded him. The timing was perfect. He could explore this side of himself fully tonight without fear of interruption. But just as he sank deeper into the thrill, a shadow of doubt crept in. What if Isabella returned early? What if the door creaked unexpectedly? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Every noise seemed amplified. Every shadow elongated, making the room feel like a stage where he was the only performer. The exhilaration of crowd dressing, the delicate blend of power and vulnerability, now merged with an unmistakable tension. Tonight, indulgence and fear danced dangerously close together. Aaron took a deep breath, letting it fill him with courage. The room around him was a sanctuary, a private world where he could explore every curve, every line, every emotion tied to this hidden identity. He twirled once in the mirror, feeling the skirt flare gracefully, and for a moment, he allowed himself to forget the outside world entirely. He was free, even if only temporarily. A prisoner of his own carefully constructed identity, finally allowed to roam without chains. Yet beneath the freedom, a subtle gnawing worry remained. Freedom always had a cost, he knew. And tonight that cost felt closer than ever. A single misstep, a single unexpected interruption, could unravel everything he had worked to protect. He looked at himself one last time, tracing the delicate curve of his neck and the soft fall of his hair. The reflection stared back with equal parts defiance and vulnerability, a silent acknowledgement of the path he had chosen. And somewhere deep inside, Aaron knew that tonight was not just about indulgence. Tonight was a test, a punishment waiting to reveal itself, and perhaps a transformation that went far beyond the dress, the makeup, or the heels. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Every creak of the floorboards under Aaron's heels felt like a gunshot, each shadow stretching unnaturally across the walls as if conspiring against him. He had done this countless times before, transformed in secret, explored this hidden version of himself. But tonight felt different. Tonight the stakes were higher, and the thrill of crowd dressing was tangled with a naring, suffocating fear that he couldn't shake. Aaron sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carefully laid-out outfit. A deep burgundy dress with delicate lace at the sleeves, a skirt that flared just enough to hint at femininity without revealing too much, and a pair of black heels that he had meticulously practiced walking in for weeks. Next to it, the accessories. A simple pearl necklace, a set of understated earrings, and a wig that cascaded in soft brown waves, mirroring the style Isabella often admired. He ran his fingers over the fabric, feeling its weight, its texture, the whisper of silk against his skin. Transformation was always a tactile experience for him. The sensation of the clothes, the soft touch of makeup brushes, the coolness of foundation against his skin. It grounded him, gave him control over a world where he could shape himself into the person he wanted to be. But control was fragile. The fear of being discovered, of having this secret ripped from him, was always there, lurking just behind the thrill. Aaron began with his face, methodically applying foundation, smoothing it over every angle that betrayed his male features. He paused, looking in the mirror, watching as his reflection blurred and shifted with each stroke. He traced his eyes with eyeliner, lengthened his lashes with mascara, and carefully added a hint of blush to his cheeks. Each step made him more someone else, more delicate, more vulnerable, and yet more alive than he felt in the mundane routine of his daytime persona. The wig came next. Aaron lifted it slowly, positioning it on his head, adjusting the part until it framed his face perfectly. He tugged gently at the strands, letting them fall naturally over his shoulders. And for a moment, the man he had always been felt distant, irrelevant. His reflection in the mirror was no longer just a man in a dress. It was a woman, or at least the closest version of himself that he had dared to create. Then came the dress. Aaron slid into it, feeling the fabric hug his body in ways that were both foreign and exhilarating. The skirt flared as he moved, brushing against his thighs with a soft whisper. He stepped into the heels, testing his balance, adjusting his posture. Every step was deliberate, careful, yet charged with a thrill he couldn't contain. Standing taller, his body transformed, he felt the strange duality of power and vulnerability, excitement, and fear coursing through him. He paused before the mirror, taking in the full effect. The transformation was complete. Yet the anxiety lingered like a shadow. What if Isabella returned early? What if she walked in right now? His chest tightened at the thought, the adrenaline mixing with the pleasure of the secret he had created. He could hear every small noise, the distant rumble of traffic, the faint hum of a neighbor's television, the soft ticking of the clock, and each one set his nerves on edge. Aaron had always loved the thrill of crossdressing, but tonight it was more than indulgence. It was a test of his courage, a confrontation with the possibility that his secret life might not remain hidden. He imagined Isabella's reaction if she saw him like this. Not just the surprise, but the potential judgment, the confusion, the hurt in her eyes. The thought made his stomach churn, but it also sharpened his senses, made every detail of his reflection, every brushstroke and fabric fold more vivid, more important. He moved carefully around the apartment, practicing the subtle sway of his hips, the gentle tilt of his head, the soft gestures that made his reflection believable. Each movement was a performance, a negotiation between who he was and who he could become. The sensation of the heels beneath his feet made him feel both taller and more exposed. A paradox that thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. But the thrill was always accompanied by fear. Aaron had spent years cultivating the secret, and the thought of exposure, of having his private identity revealed, was a weight he carried constantly. Every noise outside the door, every unexpected sound in the hallway made his pulse race. He imagined Isabella returning early, her key turning in the lock, her eyes falling on him in full transformation. What would she think? Would she laugh, cry, yell, or simply walk away? The internal conflict gnawed at him relentlessly. He loved Isabella, loved the life they had built together, and yet this secret was a part of him he couldn't abandon. The duality of desire and fear, of indulgence and consequence, made every heartbeat feel amplified. He was trapped in a delicate balance, one misstep away from disaster. And yet, the thrill of walking that line was intoxicating. Aaron's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the pearl necklace, the final accessory that completed his transformation. He took a deep breath, letting it fill him with both courage and anticipation. The room seemed to shrink around him, the walls closing in, amplifying every sound and shadow. He was both a performer and a prisoner, caught in the delicate interplay between exposure and concealment. He moved toward the window, peering through the blinds at the quiet street below. Everything seemed ordinary, almost mundane, yet the tension in the room was suffocating. The ordinary world outside contrasted sharply with the extraordinary persona he had created within these walls. He was both invisible and hypervisible, hidden in plain sight. A secret life, thriving beneath the surface of everyday existence. As he practiced a small smile in the mirror, he felt the thrill of his secret life pulse through him. The heels, the dress, the makeup, they were not just clothing and cosmetics. They were a declaration, a rebellion, a confession. And yet the fear of discovery lingered, gnawing at the edges of his exhilaration. Each creak of the floor, each shadow that flickered across the walls, was a reminder that this night was a fragile, precarious balance between freedom and exposure. Aaron closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sensations wash over him. The fabric against his skin, the subtle sway of the heels, the reflection in the mirror, the thrill of secrecy. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. He opened his eyes, staring at the reflection of the woman he had become, and wondered, how long could this secret last? How long before punishment, real, unavoidable, inevitable, became reality? The hum of the city outside seemed louder now. Each distant sound, a reminder that the world beyond these walls could intrude at any moment. The thrill of transformation was no longer a private indulgence. It was a test, a challenge, a risk that could change everything. And deep in his chest, Aaron knew that tonight the line between indulgence and consequence, between secret and exposure, was about to be crossed. The door clicked. Aaron froze. Every muscle in his body tightened. The sound was soft but deliberate. Deliberate enough to send a jolt of terror through him. Someone was outside. Someone had come home early. The fantasy, the thrill, the careful construction of identity. Everything he had built in secrecy was under threat. He tiptoed toward the bedroom door, heels clicking softly against the floor, his breath shallow, heart racing. The world outside the door was ordinary, mundane, unassuming. But the threat it posed was anything but. One misstep, one unlocked door, one unguarded moment, and everything would crumble. The knock came next. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and commanding. Aaron. The sound of Isabella's voice, soft, concerned, unknowingly threatening, cut through him like a knife. His knees weakened. His reflection in the mirror blurred as tears threatened to spill. He had transformed fully. But now the line between indulgence and punishment was no longer theoretical. It was here. And tonight, Aaron realized punishment was no longer just a possibility. It was reality. Aaron's heart pounded in his chest like a warning drum, each beat echoing louder than the last. Isabella's voice had sent a shock wave through him, freezing him in place, every muscle tight, every thought scrambling. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't risk even a whisper. The heels he had practiced walking in suddenly felt like treacherous traps under his feet. The delicate swish of the dress, a potential signal of his hidden identity. He crouched slightly behind the partially open bedroom door, hoping the shadows would conceal him. His pulse was deafening in his ears as he watched the doorknob slowly turn. Each second stretched into an eternity. He imagined Isabella stepping into the room, her gaze falling upon him fully transformed. The makeup, the wig, the dress, the heels, and the judgment, the confusion, the inevitable questions flooding over him. Aaron's mind raced back to the first time he had cross-dressed. Back then it had been curiosity, a playful experimentation. But now it had become a complicated, delicate act that balanced identity, desire, and secrecy. He knew the thrill of dressing up came with risk. But tonight, the stakes were higher. He wasn't just exploring a side of himself. He was performing it under the looming threat of discovery, the fear of losing Isabella's trust, the terror of having his secret exposed to the world. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. "Aaron, are you okay?" He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it nearly impossible to speak. Every instinct screamed to flee, to hide, but the heels pinned him in place, the skirt clinging to his legs as if reminding him how vulnerable he was. His hands shook as he adjusted the pearl necklace, trying to maintain the image, the illusion, the fragile control he had over this dangerous night. Suddenly, a shadow crossed the hallway, a figure moving silently toward his door. Aaron's breath hitched. It wasn't Isabella. It was someone he hadn't expected. His neighbor Mark, who had a habit of dropping by unannounced. The idea that anyone could witness him like this in full transformation sent a jolt of panic through his body. Aaron's mind raced. He had to think fast. If Mark entered, his secret could be exposed. He imagined the conversation, the laughter, the incredulous stare. His safe world would collapse in seconds. Slowly, carefully, he stepped back into the room, pressing himself against the wall, the heels precarious under his weight. The dress swished softly, a whisper in the tense silence, betraying his presence. Mark knocked lightly on the door before calling out, "Aaron, you in there? Just wanted to borrow some sugar real quick." Aaron's hands trembled. Sugar? A trivial thing, but it was enough to force him into action. He couldn't answer. He couldn't risk a voice that might reveal his secret. The internal conflict, fear, shame, excitement, wrestled inside him, each emotion vying for dominance. He peeked through the small gap in the door. Mark had turned his head slightly.
His curiosity piqued.
Aaron could feel the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. One wrong move, one misstep, and his carefully constructed identity would be shattered. He had to act, but his body seemed frozen, caught between instinct and terror. Taking a deep breath, Aaron shifted slightly, letting the shadows conceal his form. The heels dug into the carpet, the soft swish of the skirt echoing like a warning. He reached for the wig, adjusting it just enough to maintain the illusion of control, the illusion of normalcy. Every motion was deliberate, calculated, a delicate dance between exposure and concealment. Minutes felt like hours.
Mark knocked again, softer this time.
"Aaron, I'll come back later," he called. The sound of retreating footsteps was a relief, but the tension didn't lift. Aaron's body was still rigid, his mind racing, the adrenaline coursing through him in waves. He allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, to let the thrill and terror mix in a cocktail of excitement and dread. He returned to the mirror, examining himself with meticulous care. The reflection staring back was both familiar and foreign. A version of himself that existed only in these stolen moments, these hidden hours. He adjusted the blush on his cheeks, smoothed the wig, repositioned the heels. The act of transformation was more than appearance. It was an emotional armor, a shield against the world, against discovery, against the fear that had become almost tangible in the air around him. The door clicked again, and this time it was Isabella. She wasn't supposed to return yet. Aaron froze, every nerve in his body alert. She walked in quietly, humming softly, her keys jangling against the hook. The sight of her, so ordinary, so unaware, so close, made his pulse spike. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't risk revealing himself. Isabella's eyes swept across the room. She paused near the doorway, tilting her head slightly. "Aaron," she called softly, the tone carrying both curiosity and concern. Aaron's chest tightened. He swallowed, forcing down a gasp. The reflection in the mirror seemed to mock him. This persona, this secret, this truth hidden beneath layers of silk, makeup, and heels, teetering on the edge of discovery. He considered fleeing, stripping away the dress, the heels, the wig. But something held him back. Part of him wanted to see her reaction, to gauge the world's judgment, to confront the risk hidden. Another part, fearful, trembling, wanted only to vanish, to retreat into the safety of concealment. Isabella moved closer, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Aaron, are you okay?
You seem different tonight."
Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of attention, of focus, of the potential to uncover everything. Aaron's hands shook as he adjusted the neckline of the dress, trying to maintain composure, trying to remain believable. The heels shifted under his weight, forcing him to balance carefully. Each movement a careful negotiation with the floor, the skirt, and his own racing heartbeat. The room was suffused with tension, every sound amplified. The tick of the clock, the hum of the city outside, the soft swish of the skirt. Aaron felt both exposed and alive, exhilarated and terrified, a cocktail of emotions that left him breathless. He met Isabella's gaze, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. He saw curiosity in her eyes, a flicker of confusion, but no judgment. Yet his heart raced. Could he maintain this illusion? Could he navigate the dangerous dance of secrecy, desire, and revelation without faltering? Then a sudden noise from the hallway, a dropped key, a shifted bag, something unmistakable, made Aaron flinch. Isabella turned her head toward the sound. Panic surged. Every thought screamed at him to act, to move, to hide. But the heels pinned him. The dress clung to his body. The wig brushed against his shoulders. He was trapped in a moment of delicate tension, teetering on the edge of discovery. Aaron swallowed hard, forcing himself to relax his trembling hands. He took a small, deliberate step closer to the mirror, adjusting his posture, practicing a soft smile. The reflection stared back, confident, elegant, poised, and yet beneath the surface. His fear roared like a storm. The night had begun as indulgence, but it was fast becoming a test of courage, identity, and survival. Isabella's voice broke through the tension. "Aaron, are you sure you're okay? You seem different." Aaron nodded slowly, trying to convey calm, trying to project the persona he had built so carefully. His lips curved into a practiced smile, his posture straightened, the heels carrying him with deliberate grace. But inside, the storm of fear, excitement, and vulnerability raged unchecked. The night stretched on, each second a negotiation with reality. Aaron moved carefully through the apartment. Every gesture, every step, every glance measured and deliberate. He was performing, surviving, living on the knife's edge between secrecy and exposure, between indulgence and punishment. And deep in his chest, a knowing realization took hold. The night was far from over. The thrill, the fear, the transformation, they were only the beginning. The punishment he had avoided for so long, the reality he had skirted with every careful step, was coming, and there was no escaping it. Aaron's body trembled as Isabella's footsteps grew closer. Each tap of her shoes against the floor echoed in his ears like a countdown to disaster. The heels he had mastered for grace now felt like instruments of torture, amplifying every shift of weight and every nervous twitch. The dress clung to him in a way that felt dangerously intimate, a reminder that exposure was not just possible. It was imminent. His mind raced through scenarios, each more terrifying than the last.
What if she walked in right now?
What if the door creaked under the pressure of a hand on the knob? The very thought made him shiver. The thrill that had electrified him earlier now twisted into a gnawing terror. Every brushstroke of makeup, every curl of the wig, every delicate pearl of the necklace. All of it could betray him in an instant. Aaron took a slow, trembling breath and tried to steady himself. He reminded himself of the plan. Calm, composed, elegant. Move with intention, not panic. But panic had already taken root. His reflection in the mirror seemed alive, almost mocking him with its flawless pose, its delicate curves, its soft, alluring eyes that mirrored his deepest secrets. He was a work of art and a ticking bomb waiting to detonate. A sudden sound, a soft click from the hallway, made Aaron freeze. Isabella's voice followed louder now, tinged with curiosity and concern. "Aaron, are you hiding something from me?" The word struck him like a physical blow. His heart leapt into his throat. He wanted to speak, to explain, to calm her curiosity. But his voice faltered, trapped behind the dual walls of fear and desire. If he spoke, if he moved wrong, the illusion could shatter in an instant. His secret, his carefully curated identity, his very private life could be exposed in one devastating moment. Aaron took a small step back, trying to blend into the shadows, trying to make himself smaller, invisible, undetectable. The heels made the motion precarious, the skirt swishing softly, as if betraying his every move. He clenched his fists, forcing down the tremor that threatened to give him away. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to flee, to strip off the dress, to abandon the persona he had crafted so carefully. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when the stakes were this high. Isabella moved closer, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Aaron, something feels different. Are you experimenting, or is this more than that?" Aaron's chest tightened. He could feel the heat rising to his cheeks, the blush of makeup amplifying what his heart already shouted. Exposure, judgment, vulnerability. Every instinct screamed to hide, to retreat. But another more reckless part of him, the side that had dressed in secret for years, urged him to stay, to confront the moment, to let the truth flicker for just an instant. A sharp knock at the front door interrupted the tense standoff. Aaron froze, muscles rigid. Who could it be? Not Isabella. She was standing just behind him, now aware that something was off. Another visitor, a neighbor. The threat was immediate, real, unavoidable. He knew he had seconds to decide. Isabella's voice, soft but commanding, broke through his panic. "Aaron, open the door." "Who is it?" Aaron's mind raced. If he opened it, the secret could be exposed. If he didn't, suspicion would grow, Questions would multiply, and the fragile illusion would crumble under the weight of unanswered curiosity. His pulse pounded in his ears, each beat echoing louder than the last. The doorknob turned slowly. Aaron's breath hitched. Isabella glanced toward it, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. The visitor, Mark, his nosy neighbor, stepped in, completely unaware of the storm that had been brewing inside the apartment. His eyes widened as they fell on Aaron, fully transformed, standing frozen in the burgundy dress, heels clicking softly against the floor. Mark froze mid-step, mouth slightly open. The silence was deafening. Aaron felt a rush of heat, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and vulnerability washing over him. This was it. The moment he had feared for months. The moment when indulgence and punishment collided. Isabella's gasp was soft, but it cut through the tension like a blade.
Aaron, what?
What is happening? Aaron's mind scrambled for words, for explanations, for a lifeline. He could feel tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. The years of secrecy, the hours spent perfecting makeup and outfits, the careful cultivation of his hidden identity. All of it hung in the balance, suspended by the fragile threads of Mark's frozen stare and Isabella's shocked expression. He took a deep, trembling breath. "I wanted to see what it feels like to be me," he stammered. Each word a struggle, each pause weighted with fear. The room was silent for a moment, the air thick with tension and disbelief. Then Isabella stepped closer, her expression softening, curiosity mingling with concern. "Aaron, you mean this is who you are?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, this is me, my secret. Something I've been afraid to show, afraid of losing you over." Mark, still frozen, finally cleared his throat. But it was Isabella's voice that dominated the moment. "Aaron, I don't know what to say, but I see you. I hear you." Her words faltered, but the softness in her eyes told him something he hadn't dared hope for. Acceptance, or at least understanding. For the first time that night, Aaron allowed himself to breathe. The terror of exposure hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. The punishment he had feared, the shattering of his secret, the collapse of his private identity, wasn't absolute. There was a chance, a sliver, that his truth could be acknowledged, even embraced. But the tension wasn't over. Mark's curious eyes, Isabella's hesitant gaze, the reality of the night, it was all a delicate balance. Aaron knew that one wrong move, one slip, one revealing gesture, could undo the fragile calm that had settled over the room. The heels pinched his feet. The skirt clung to his body. The wig brushed against his shoulders, a constant reminder of vulnerability, of exposure, of the razor-thin line between indulgence and catastrophe. Aaron met Isabella's gaze again, searching for reassurance, for understanding, for a signal that he hadn't miscalculated. Her eyes softened, her lips curved into a tentative smile. "Aaron, we'll figure this out, but for now, just breathe." The words were a lifeline, a tether to sanity in the storm of fear and thrill that had consumed him. Aaron closed his eyes briefly, letting the adrenaline ebb slightly, letting the thrill and terror mix into a complex cocktail that left him shaking but alive. The night was far from over. The punishment, the reality of exposure, the test of courage and identity. It was only just beginning. Aaron had survived the first wave of discovery, but the challenges ahead loomed large, threatening to unravel everything he had built in secret. And deep in his chest, he knew one truth. The night would demand more than indulgence, more than secrecy, more than courage. It would demand transformation inside and out, and he had no choice but to face it. Aaron's pulse hammered in his ears as he stood frozen in the burgundy dress, heels clicking softly against the floor. The apartment had shrunk into a cage, the walls closing in, every shadow a threat. Isabella's tentative acceptance was both a relief and a source of terror. Any sudden movement, any misplaced word could shatter the fragile calm. Mark, still awkwardly in the room, shifted his gaze nervously, unsure how to react. Aaron, I didn't mean to intrude," he mumbled, his voice tight. But even as he spoke, Aaron's heart pounded harder. He could feel every fiber of the dress, Every strap of the heels, every curl of the wig, and each sensation amplified the vulnerability that had been building since the moment he had first transformed. Aaron swallowed hard. He could barely breathe. The room felt suffocating. Yet the thrill of being seen, of existing fully in this persona, even under threat, was intoxicating. He tried to steady his trembling hands, brushing them lightly along the fabric of the dress, feeling the delicate lace and the smooth silk, reminding himself of the control he could exert over his appearance, even if his secret identity was at risk. Isabella stepped closer, her hand hovering near his arm. Aaron, I want to understand, but you need to be honest with me. This is who you are, right? Aaron's lips quivered. Yes, it's me. This is who I've been hiding. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of confession lifted slightly, as if sharing the truth could somehow stabilize the chaos in his chest. Mark, shifting awkwardly, cleared his throat again. Well, I guess it's interesting. I mean, you look really, different, but good. He trailed off, eyes darting between Aaron and Isabella, unsure of whether to laugh, compliment, or step back in shock. Aaron's breath caught. The casual, almost dismissive tone of Mark's words could have triggered panic. But instead, it amplified the surreal thrill of the night. He was being seen, acknowledged, and yet the fear of judgment still lurked in every corner. The heels pinched his feet, the skirt swished with every tiny movement, and the wig brushed lightly against his shoulders, a constant reminder that any misstep could reveal too much. Suddenly, the apartment door creaked. Another visitor. Another threat. Aaron froze, muscles rigid. Isabella's eyes widened and Mark stiffened. The tension was almost unbearable. Every heartbeat a drum of impending disaster. Aaron slowly turned toward the sound, careful not to stumble in the heels, careful not to give away even a hint of panic. It was the mailman. Relief flooded Aaron, followed almost immediately by renewed anxiety. This night was unpredictable, and the balance between indulgence and exposure was precarious. Every sound, every movement, every shadow could trigger disaster. He was trapped in a high-stakes game, one where the consequences were immediate and personal, and the thrill was inseparable from the fear. Aaron took a careful step back toward the mirror, practicing calm, letting the reflection remind him of control, of poise, of the persona he had crafted so meticulously. The reflection was flawless, delicate, and yet terrifyingly real. He could see the tension in his own eyes, the way his lips trembled slightly, the subtle quiver of his fingers. This was both him and not him, a perfect blend of vulnerability and strength. Isabella's voice broke through the moment, soft but insistent. Aaron, I need to know, have you ever done this before? How long has this been going on? Aaron's chest tightened. Confession was a double-edged sword. Truth could build intimacy, but it could also shatter everything. I've done this in secret for a while. I didn't know how to tell you, or if I could. His voice trembled, carrying both fear and an unexpected pride. Mark, fidgeting, finally spoke again. I guess I didn't expect this, but you look happy. I mean, I don't know, but you look like yourself. Aaron swallowed, the mix of fear, relief, and exhilaration washing over him. The acknowledgement, even from a casual observer, reinforced the delicate balance between exposure and acceptance. The thrill of being seen, the terror of discovery, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. It all converged in a single overwhelming moment. Then, a sudden noise. Isabella's phone buzzing sharply on the counter snapped Aaron's attention. In the split second he turned, the edge of the dress brushed against the corner of the mirror. He froze as a small strand of the wig slipped, threatening to fall and reveal the full extent of his transformation. Panic surged. He lunged subtly, catching the wig just in time, but the sudden motion made the heels slip slightly, forcing him to steady himself against the edge of the dresser. The adrenaline coursed through him, a heady mix of fear and thrill. His secret hung by a thread, yet he felt more alive than he ever had. The precarious balance between punishment and pleasure electrifying every nerve in his body. Isabella noticed. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't comment, only watching, curious and concerned. Erin's chest tightened. Her silence was both a relief and a threat. Every heartbeat felt amplified, every breath heavy with anticipation. Mark, sensing the tension, but not fully grasping it, stepped back cautiously. Maybe I should, leave," he offered, his voice tentative. Erin nodded slightly, relief mingling with a persistent fear. As Mark left, closing the door behind him, the apartment seemed to shrink further. The heels, the dress, the wig, they were no longer just expressions of identity, but instruments in a dangerous game. The thrill of exposure and the fear of discovery were inseparable, each amplifying the other in a crescendo of tension. Alone again with Isabella, Erin felt the full weight of vulnerability. The thrill of crowd dressing, the exhilaration of transformation, the terror of punishment, all collided in a moment of intimate confrontation. Isabella's eyes, soft but searching, seemed to see through the carefully constructed persona, glimpsing both the man he had always been and the person he was daring to become. Erin took a shaky breath. "Isabella, I need you to understand.
This is part of me.
I can't hide it anymore." She stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "Erin, I see you. And I don't know everything yet, but I want to. We'll figure this out together." The words, tender yet firm, were a lifeline. Erin's chest loosened slightly, but the tension in the room didn't dissipate entirely. The night was far from over. The thrill, the fear, the exposure. They were only building towards something even greater. The danger of discovery, the temptation of indulgence, the dance between identity and reality. All of it was far from complete. Erin glanced at the mirror one last time, taking in the reflection, the heels, the wig, the dress, the carefully applied makeup.
They weren't just objects.
They were symbols of a secret life, of courage, of vulnerability, of desire, of fear. And tonight that life was hanging by a single delicate thread, caught between punishment and acceptance, between revelation and concealment. The night wasn't over. The punishment he had feared, the reality he had skirted for so long, was approaching faster than he could control. And deep in his chest, a thrilling, terrifying truth settled. He had survived the first wave, but the storm of discovery, of emotional confrontation, of irreversible transformation was only just beginning. Erin's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. The adrenaline from the evening's events still coursed through his veins, leaving his hands trembling and his legs unsteady in the heels that had carried him through so many secret transformations. The apartment, once a familiar sanctuary, now felt like a stage where every shadow could expose him, every breath could betray his carefully guarded secret. Isabella stood a few steps away, her expression unreadable. Soft concern and curiosity mingled in her gaze. But Erin couldn't tell if acceptance or judgment would come next. Every second stretched painfully, weighted with the possibility of disaster. He had confessed, revealed a hidden side of himself that he had guarded for years, and yet the outcome remained uncertain. Erin's reflection in the mirror caught his eye, and for the first time, he noticed the full impact of his transformation. The wig framed his face perfectly. The makeup accentuated his features in a way that was both stunning and terrifying, and the dress hugged his body delicately, emphasizing curves that had once been hidden. He looked beautiful, but the beauty carried a sharp edge of vulnerability. One wrong move, and everything could unravel. A sudden creak from the hallway made him freeze. His pulse spiked. Had Isabella called someone? Was the door opening again? Every nerve in his body screamed in alarm, the thrill of his secret self colliding with the terror of exposure. He instinctively adjusted the hem of the dress and shifted slightly on the heels, trying to appear calm, but inside panic churned. Isabella stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "Erin, are you sure you're okay?" Her voice was soft, almost soothing, yet carried an unspoken intensity as if testing his composure, gauging the truth of his confession. Erin swallowed hard, forcing a steady voice. I'm fine. Just a lot to take in, I guess." But even as he spoke, He felt the fragile thread of control slipping. The night had started as a private indulgence, a playful escape, and now it had transformed into a high-stakes revelation that threatened everything he had tried to protect. He took a small step back, glancing at the hallway door. The faint sound of movement made his stomach twist. His mind raced with possibilities. What if someone else showed up? What if Isabella suddenly reacted differently, overwhelmed by surprise, judgment, or confusion? The very air felt electric, charged with suspense, and Aaron realized he was standing on the edge of a precipice. Isabella's eyes softened again, but there was a flicker of doubt, tiny, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Aaron's chest tighten. He wanted to reach for her hand to hold onto some connection, but fear pinned him in place. The heels made every step precarious. The dress restricted his movements, and the wig felt like both armor and trap. A knock at the door shattered the tense silence. Aaron froze, his body rigid, every muscle taut. The sound was deliberate, insistent, and unexpected. He looked at Isabella wide-eyed. He whispered, voice trembling. Isabella shook her head slightly, uncertainty flickering across her face. I didn't expect anyone else tonight, she murmured. Aaron's stomach dropped. The knock came again, louder this time, echoing through the apartment like a drum beat of doom. His mind raced. Every possible scenario flashed before him. Friends, neighbors, strangers, but none mattered more than the risk of discovery. The possibility that his carefully concealed identity could be exposed in an instant. The reflection in the mirror seemed to taunt him. The image of his transformed self staring back with unflinching honesty. Every detail, perfectly applied makeup, flowing wig, elegant dress, delicate heels, was a symbol of vulnerability, a target for exposure. Aaron realized with a jolt that the punishment he had feared wasn't over. It was only beginning, and the stakes had just escalated beyond anything he had anticipated. Isabella's hand lightly rested on his arm again, grounding him. Yet the tension in the room was electric. Aaron, maybe we should see who it is, she said softly. Aaron's pulse raced. One small action, one careless move could shatter everything. He wanted to step forward to face whatever waited at the door, but the heels pinched his feet. The dress clung to his body, and the weight of fear and anticipation rooted him to the spot. The knock came a third time, insistent, almost demanding. Aaron's breath hitched. He felt the adrenaline spike, the thrill and terror intertwining in a chaotic dance. 1 second, he imagined humiliation, exposure, judgment. The next, he imagined exhilaration, acceptance, liberation. The extremes collided inside him, leaving him trembling, caught between fear and desire, secrecy and revelation. Isabella looked at him, her eyes searching for an answer. Aaron, what do you want to do? The question hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Every instinct pulled him to flee, to strip off the dress, to retreat to safety. But a bolder, braver part, the part that had embraced his secret for so long, urged him to stay, to confront the unknown, to see the night through, no matter the cost. Aaron swallowed, his hands clenching at his sides. He took a deep, steadying breath, summoning courage he didn't know he had left. The knock came again, a sharp, demanding sound that echoed through the apartment. The moment had arrived, and then the doorknob began to turn. Aaron froze, every heartbeat deafening. Isabella's hand tightened slightly on his arm. The door creaked, swinging open slowly. The threshold held a shadow, a figure looming in the dim light. Aaron's eyes widened. The room was still, the air thick with suspense. Every detail amplified. The swish of the dress, the heels on the floor, the tremor in his hands. His secret, his carefully guarded identity, the reality he had feared for so long, hung in the balance. And then the figure stepped forward. But the story stops here. What happens next? Does Aaron get caught? Does Isabella accept him fully? Or does the night spiral into chaos, exposing everything he has tried to hide? Speech balloon. Comment your predictions below. What do you think happens when the door opens?